I'm a security architect for IBM, and I want to talk about the threat protection system. First, I'm going to talk about the security portfolio. IBM has a wide range of different security products. There's close to a couple dozen now that we've put together in our portfolio. Our approach is to use a COVID model, and with that, the understanding is that we want to know who is accessing the data, so the people part of it, and we have products that are associated with single sign-on, identity and access management, federated identity, and a variety of other things. So we have a pretty good coverage of who's actually gets access to what within your infrastructure. Data, we have again a number of tools. Guardium in particular guards the database and would apply the identity information that we've gotten from our other tools. Applications, in today's time frame, most of the applications are web-based. We have, again, a variety of different products in this space. AppScan, for instance, allows us to look at the source code as well as look at the scan the code that's operational. And then the last column here is infrastructure, and where I'm going to spend most of my time talking about two products. One is Trustier Apex, and the other one is going to be XGS in conjunction with QRadar. So kind of to encapsulate this all together, we know who's accessing the data through our data tools like Guardian. When data is accessed by user, information is passed to QRadar. We know what their credentials, and we're able to provide sort of compliance, whether it's internal compliance or PCI compliance or a variety of other things. If there's vulnerabilities on the website, we have the ability to identify that, and that comes into play in our QRadar product, being able to ascertain if the event is important because, in fact, the target that they had in mind is a target that is vulnerable. So when you pull all of that together, we're able to provide a lot of information, a lot of coordination amongst our products. The fraud piece, and I won't go into that, but just want to make a comment. We do manage 100 million endpoints across the world in the banking industry. Now, you may be in a different industry than banking, but what that does for you with the IBM solution is we have all these points that we're monitoring and identifying the different kinds of things that people are trying to do to the platforms across the globe. That information goes into our X-Force team. In fact, we have every one of the different groups that we have has members that are part of the X-Force team. That information gives us IP reputation. It gives us information about the new malicious codes that are being created, the new exploits, and that in turn finds its way into products like Trustier, XGS, Guardium, AppScan, and quite a number of our different product offerings. At the top of this, we have our QRadar offering. QRadar came as an anomaly detector originally, and from that we grew it into having the characteristics of a SIM. And later what we did is we added a couple other components I'll speak to here in a second. Risk Manager is considering you have an environment that has multiple networks and potentially multiple routers and firewalls. We're able to pull in the information, the configuration data on that, plus all of that flow data in that environment. So we get a picture of not only what's happening from an event standpoint and a flow standpoint as well as the vulnerability standpoint, which I'll talk to in a second, but we know how that information is transferring across your network. So QRadar Risk Manager also allows us to test out theories. So if I change a firewall rule, how will that affect the flow? Will that affect my applications? And do that in such a way that you are assured that you can turn it on and continue to do business. The next box is QRadar Vulnerability Manager. It's a scanner, and side that scans infrastructure, it scans applications, it scans your like your Windows environment, your Linux environment, a variety of other things, and in addition, it brings in the scan data that might have come from, like Guardium has an assessment that we can pull in. It tells what's the vulnerability of the database that we've got. AppScan can tell us what the vulnerabilities of the applications are. Endpoint Manager, BigFix, can bring in the data on what's going on with the endpoints that it manages. So Vulnerability Manager allows us to pull those all together, and if an alert comes along that a new exploit has been identified, we are able to quickly go into the Vulnerability Manager, identify the assets that you have that vulnerability, and go forward from there. The last one in the column here is the QRadar Incident Forensics. And what that is an application that allows us to understand what happened and replay the chats, replay the emails, replay the content of the emails to go back and do deep packet inspection and understanding of what happened and potentially the material that you need for any kind of litigation that you would need going forward. So let's get into the threat protection system. The threat protection system, as we see it, is broken into 3 parts. It's to prevent the environment, detect what's going on, and then to respond. The first part, or prevent, which is what I'm going to go into on some of the demos here, is Apex and XGS. We have other products in this space, but we're going to highlight these. Apex, basic client. We'll go into more detail in the PowerPoint. And XGS is protecting the network that your infrastructure is on. So whether it's servers or clients or other components, it gets in line and is able to identify malicious code and make sure that exploits are quarantined or blocked. QRadar is our single pane of glass. We're able to see all of this information. What's key to the QRadar solution is that because of its ability to pull past history and understand anomaly differences, so if Jane in our demo logs in 5 times a day regularly and downloads a certain amount of activity, all of a sudden that increases by a factor of several hundred, then we need to make sure that we take care of that. And so QRadar identifies that as an offense and allows us to quickly resolve that. And I mentioned the forensic product. Forensic product, again, will allow you to relive the packet capture, even to the point of opening up the documents that were transmitted via email or were copied into different areas, and allow you to, again, to get a deep understanding of what happened and what you need to do next. In addition to that, we do have rapid and emergency response services. So if you have an issue that you need to resolve immediately, we can get online with you and help you identify what you've got and what you need to do next. What I want to do now is I'm going to get into the TrustTier Apex product and talk about what it brings from a security standpoint to your client environment. The first bullet I'll talk into more detail as in the next slide, but the idea is that it's not a single type of mechanism. There's multiple things that we provide from the Apex security standpoint. The low operational impact component means that first it's transparent to your users, and from a standpoint of getting this thing up and running and getting it operational and usable by the IT teams, you're able to, it's a cloud-based environment, you're able to identify your assets, you're able to identify the state of them, what their vulnerabilities are, and the activities that occur as people are accessing whatever they do in their daily business. The dynamic intelligence speaks to the point that we are pulling in data from a variety of different sources As I mentioned on the fraud side, we have over 100 million endpoints that we're managing, and we have tens of thousands of other points that we're pulling in from all kinds of other devices that we manage. From an Apex standpoint, these are the major categories of support that we have for the product. One is to make sure that your users are not using the same credentials for their Google accounts and for Facebook and the rest, and make sure that your internal value is not breached due to a user's misuse of passwords in another environment. The second thing that we do is we're able to disrupt this exploitation chain. We're able to identify, even though there may be patches required in the environment, we're able to identify that and put ourselves in play so that the exploits don't affect the end user's environment. The malware detection, again, we're pulling, the packets apart, we're pulling the content apart, we're looking for malicious code, and as you'll see in the demo, we're able to stop that from occurring. In the Java environment, a lot of things happen within the Java engine itself. We're able to bring ourselves and monitor the activities of the Java engine and keep the exploits occurring that other products in the market haven't been able to do. And in the demo, you're also going to see where we block things like keyloggers and disrupt the command and control, remote command and control. So what I'm going to do now, and because of the power outage, this will be kind of interesting, I'm going to jump over to a server here. Before I get into it, I just want to point something out before I lose it on the screen here. Recently, we had a shell command injection that has been causing some trouble in the market. When I get into the XJS, we have a very different way of approaching managing vulnerabilities. In fact, we built our engine around vulnerabilities versus around the exploits themselves. For that reason, we designed an algorithm back in 2007 that actually was able to identify the events that have happened in the last week. So again, hats off to our X-Force team, but we continue to show that our approach, using a vulnerability approach, is able to not only identify things that are currently being exploits that are current, but also in time we find that our algorithms are able to find similar or mutations of those and continue to protect your environment. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shift into the Apex demo. Okay. So let's bring up Apex. So two parts to the story here. One is we have a bad guy. The bad guy is basically running a command control application, in this case, that is listening. It's called Dark Comet Rat, and it's looking for response back from malicious code that he sent out to the populace, hoping that people will click on PDFs and pictures, and that will allow them to have command and control in their environment. So the good guy, we'll bring up the good guy now, has no idea that the emails that they have basically exploits. I brought up the task manager because it's important to understand that the way that the bad guy hid this code is it's masquerading as an Internet Explorer process. So let's bring up our email. And our email basically is enticing because it says regarding your bonus, and most of us would be thinking that that's a good thing to watch out for. I'm going to open it up and take a look at my PDF and see what kind of a big bonus I got from my boss. Unfortunately, when I clicked on it, the PDF didn't come up, and I might click that over and over again and wonder what happened. What did happen, though, is that we did have a piece of botnet connect. It's phoned home, and in fact, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn on a keylogger on the bad guy. And so we'll turn that on here. And now we have our keylogger all set up, which means we're going to watch what our user is going to be doing in the next few minutes. I don't see my bonus, so let's find out. I've got automatic deposit. Let's go in and check on my bank account. So I'm going to bring up the my bank account, and I'm going to sign into it. And we'll log in. And now I'm into my account, and I can go off and just check my recent transactions and my balance. And with a looks like I probably don't have a lot of money. And the bad news is that that session has been recorded by the bad guy. As you can see on the screen, JDO demo 1234, not too clever in the password department, but someone can now take that information and send it off to tens of or hundreds or thousands of people to start digging into your life and your bank account and pulling whatever you have left out of there. So let's close out the keylogger for a moment, and well, before we close that, let's go back to our environment and look at what happens in Windows here. Here's an Internet Explorer process, which is actually the malicious code that is masquerading as Internet Explorer. The operating system thinks it's Internet Explorer. Most of the IT staff, if they looked at it, would probably say that looks like it's something from Internet Explorer. A lot of processes spawn from Internet Explorer. Now, that's not to pick on Internet Explorer, but in this case, that's what would happen. So let's go ahead. We'll stop this process. And now we're going to go back and take a look at that task, and we'll see that Internet Explorer is no longer active in there. So let's go to the email again, and let's look at another document. The individual got a second email. This particular one has a link, goes to a website. So the boss said, why don't you jump on a plane, go someplace, because you have a lot of money now because of your bonus. So he clicks on a picture, and embedded in that picture was malicious code, as you can see. So if we click on this, these tools are very capable. So not only can I get keyloggers going, but I can change files, delete files, add files, modify, system tools, and a variety of other things while I have control of your environment. I'm going to just bring up the remote desktop at this moment, and I'll start capturing that screen. So here's my my airplane that I have on the other screen. We'll go back over here. And let's look at our task manager. So we now have 3 Internet Explorer processes, one of which is not an Internet Explorer process. So what we'll do is we'll close out this server. So we're now cutting the connection from the good guy to the bad guy. I'm going to go back to the good guy's server or system. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn on the endpoint protection from Trusteer. So Apex is now coming online. What's prompted on the screen would typically not show up in your end user's environment. It's all hidden, but for purposes of the demo, I need to make sure it's all up and running. So what this will do is it'll shim itself into the operating system, and it starts monitoring the activities of the processes that are running. Again, this is a significant differentiator from ourselves and other things, not from a selling standpoint, but the mechanics of this is that we are looking for applications doing things they shouldn't be doing. So Notepad shouldn't be sending, messages out to places or sending files to different places. So that's, again, a key component in how this particular mechanism works. So in a minute, we should have our trusteer should come up. I'm going to close this out, bring it back, bring up our process here. And it looks like it's about ready to finish. What we should get is a little, there it is, the trusteer icon in the bottom. Now if I go to the link that brought up the picture of the plane, what happens is it doesn't send a message home. So I could do the same with the PDF and it wouldn't send a message home as well. So again, this is where the Apex product, again, running on your client, is able to analyze the running processes and make sure that they're not doing things that they shouldn't. What I want to do now is I'm going to put away these servers, and I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint for a minute or two, and we're going to talk about the XGS. The XGS product has been out for a couple of years now, and it's our next-gen security product. In the last year or so, we've gained significant accolades in the marketplace because we've been able to add a variety of different services within this product. And most remarkably, we've done very well on mutated types of exploits. Where there's certainly the broadcasts and updates as to CVEs and changes in exploits that are out there that are known, what we've been known for is the ability to analyze those variations of those. So there's a document called the Tally report that shows that even if you change something like the variable names or add a comment or change the spelling of different things within an exploit, they have the ability to get past many of the snort engines that are out in the marketplace. We do provide snort as part of our technology because a number of folks like working in that technology. But I'll let you know we take the snort information, we compile it so it becomes an active part of our integrated solution in our XGS product. Looking at the XGS, there's a lot of different versions of it, from something that will handle 4 network connections to one that can have multiple physical connections, whether they're copper or fiber, 1 gig, 10 gig, or faster. The security components that make up the XGS is we have a thing called a virtual patch. The virtual patch is on Super Tuesdays, when there's the announcement of patches that are available because of vulnerabilities that have been found. More than likely you'll want to test your patches before you deploy these into your operational servers. What we've done is we are aware of those vulnerabilities as part of our standard relationship with the different vendors that build in the products and our own tests that we run. So if you have, let's say, a Windows server behind that's being protected by the XGS, and there's a known exploit that has come out recently, or let's take the shell command injection. If you add a Unix box that is susceptible to the bash exploit that has been identified, our virtual patch will keep that thing from being exploited. Again, the value there is that you want to make sure that your applications are running and tested before you deploy them into an operational environment. In addition to that, we have game control. Unless you're a gaming company, more than likely you want to make sure that your folks are not using your network and your systems for gaming. We do, on the third box, we do client-side application protection. So we'll rip into emails and the documents that are attached to the email and into the PDFs, and we'll look for malicious code, whether it's been encrypted or a number of different ways of hiding the data. We'll pull that out and protect whatever's behind the XGS. We will protect that from being exploited. Web application protection we've had for several years, and that includes what we just talked about, from things like shellcode or SQL injection, actually the OWASP. If you looked at the OWASP exploits, you'll find an equivalent component that is in our web application protection. So we provide that, and in fact the SQL injection and cross-site scripting algorithm that we wrote back in the 2007 timeframe still fully operational, and it has a record of identifying all SQL injection cross-site scripting that has been exposed since that time. So network and user policies, we have the ability to identify the users and tie that off to other things, the assets within the environment, as well as websites, gaming, and also protect them from environments that have exploits and such, which is actually part of the next box. But user awareness or group awareness and content awareness is something that we added as part of our XGS product here. IP reputation, a couple things, data points. We're the third largest web crawler in the world. There's Google, Bing, and then ourselves. We have more sites characterized from a security standpoint than any of our competitors by a factor of likely 10 or more. So we've also characterized the application environment. So we watch for activities on the wrong ports that are, by knowing that someone's trying to do SSH on a different port or is doing a morphed version of a protocol, we're able to look at that and understand that the packet is malformed on purpose to try to take advantage of vulnerabilities that may be in the wild. Web application management, many companies need to provide Facebook access for users, just as an example, but at the same time, you don't want them to be able to upload and download things. So given that, we have the ability to control what applications they can run and what time of day they can run those things. And the last piece is network visibility. We pull the network flow data, and we push that into, and not only does the box receive it, but it also shares that with QRadar. So again, a lot more information than just simply event data can be transmitted from this device to QRadar. This is the slide. Just basically states again that in 2007 we had a shell shock vulnerability already identified, not by that name, but by its malicious intent. And so again, we were able to do this 261 days before the actual impact hit the marketplace. QRadar, just as a comment, we're pulling data in from the XGS. We're pulling in the flow data to XGS, along with the anomaly components that are built into the QRadar product. A good example of how well this works is that we have some clients that are doing, 1 billion events a day, which would be unmanageable. But because of QRadar's ability to really hone in on what the event is, what is the target, what is that target's importance in the environment, and further, what is the likelihood of that particular event causing harm to that asset. So we're able to quickly take a lot of event data, a lot of flow data, and boil it down to a handful, a couple dozen in this case, that makes it far easier to manage your overall security environment. Vulnerability Manager, I'll show here in a minute. And I'm going to get into the demo so we can move on with that. So I'm back into the environment. I'm bringing up QRadar. On the QRadar dashboard, and I only spent a little bit of time on here, we do track, there's a quick news area that can identify what's going on in your environment. From this, you could actually get into the vulnerability tab, click for that vulnerability in that vulnerability tab, and it'll identify all the assets that have that vulnerability and then at that point you can take action, to correct that, or in the case of putting them in line with the XGS, you can make sure it'll actually show that this has got a virtual patch with the IPS engine from IBM. So what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to go over to log activity here, and I'm going to double-click it to clear the cache here. And what this is all about is how does QRadar and XGS work together to stop bad things from happening, but allow things that are good to continue to happen. So, for instance, I have a browser here, and we like people, if you're a bank, you like people to use the bank. And so you don't want to disrupt the process of, now we know Jay Doe has got demo 1, 2, 3, 4, if we can log in. But here's Jane is logged in, and Jane can go in, look at her transactions, and life is pretty good for Jane or for John here. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to a browser. Now, this is the browser of a user that's outside of the company, and somebody that in a second here you're going to see is going to be involved in things that are just not appropriate. They didn't happen to watch the video, so they don't know the username and password. So what they're going to do is they're going to put an injection, 101 or 1 equals 1, and they're going to put in any old password in here. So they've logged in now, and or they've logged in, and as you can see, they can get into account summary, look at what the account. Well, that's where I'm at here. I could look at what the account balance is. $52 million is available to me to take that and move it into my account. Not too bad a day for the bad guy. So what happens over on this side, I'm now back at the QRadar dashboard, and what I've seen is I have this IP, 1066.467, has actually done an exploit, has done an XPath injection. That's not allowed. So what I'm going to do is put QRadar in pause for a moment, and I'm going to right-click on that IP. I have an option. I could actually scan that, but I probably want to block it because of its activity. So what happens is that I've just sent an event off to the XGS and said, stop everything, keep this IP from exploiting our environment. I could have, if someone had actually connected to a web server with FTP or SSH, I could have clicked on that port, and then the XGS would have known that to block only that port for that IP. So it's not a case of all things would happen to that one IP. We can be very selective with this tool. So if we go back now to this user on the outside, we see that we have a TCP reset, and they can't get into the account. So what happened in the background here, and I'm going to do a refresh on this because I think it's logged me off by now. We'll log in. So this is the XGS local management interface. We have the ability to manage dozens or hundreds of these things, collectively. But I'm showing the local management interface, which, by the way, looks exactly the same on our dashboard that we would use for managing dozens of these. So what happened is we had an event, and the event was an advanced threat, and I used before, but 10:43 Central Time, which was a few minutes ago, we had a quarantine that was created. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go over to Secure. I'm going to look at my quarantine rules. Typically, in an IT environment, I would make a decision on whether to continue this quarantine or disable this quarantine. So there's a lot of things that we can do now as far as from an IT environment security standpoint, what to do about this particular event. But I'm going to delete it so that we can get through our demo today, and we'll say yes. So now the quarantine has been lifted. If I hit, I'm going back to that other server, and I'm able now to get into Altoro Mutual. So what I just presented was the fact that not only do we have a very broad range of capabilities within the XGS from a standpoint of managing different malicious code to happen within your environment. But we also have we also have a way of managing that within the QRadar dashboard.